Welcome to the Raising Values podcast, where the traditional family talks. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can support the Raising Values podcast through Patreon. Phil and Gillian are behind the mic, and we hope you enjoy the show.
So, welcome back to Raising Values. Gillian and I are here and are joined by a friend of ours, Eddie Davenport, who is going to help us out with this topic. Because, like, Gillian and I often have to speak from our own experience and as lay people, and it's interesting for us to have a professional on board. So, like, Eddie, if you would take a moment and just...
He giggled.
Oh, and I totally forgot to introduce... This is Gillian's adopted son.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you today, Eddie. The topic today is a little, it's a little sensitive and sad because I feel like we're always going through so much, but we're excited to have you to kind of guide us today, Eddie. So introduce yourself.
So, as I said, my name's Eddie Davenport. I am a mental health therapist out of Western North Carolina, out in the mountains. For those who actually care, I am a LCSW and LCAS, so licensed clinical, licensed social.
It is Saturday morning. Give us some grace.
I deal with social worker.
Yeah, licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical addiction specialist. Wow, I really blanked on that one. Starting off strong. I do sit on the board for Walk the Talk America, so we are the intersection of guns and mental health. We work with the firearms industry and the mental health industry to try to help bridge the gap between safe, responsible gun ownership without using laws, because laws generally don't have the right effect, and they generally suck for all involved except the politicians.
Right. Awesome. So today's episode, we're going to talk about abuse and the many forms of abuse. And I think what has been so hard for us, I would say the last, 3 months, is an old friend of ours, a friend of really Phil's, until I came into the picture, is going through a very, very difficult situation, one that we kind of thought was happening. We didn't realize the extent, and some of the abuse is just so bizarre and so out of this world. I didn't think people... I knew people were ugly and could be disgusting human beings, but I really didn't know that abuse could be like this and be this disgusting. And when I say disgusting, I mean it in a way of the type of abuse that is happening, which I think for our friend is sexual, and manipulation, but narcissism and all. You name it, it's in this. It is happening in this relationship, and it has gotten to a very scary place a couple of times. It has gotten to a scary place recently, and we're afraid that he's too far gone. Like there's not going to be a place for him to come back to, because he's just so far into this abuse. So anyway, we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit. And of course, a lot of people have heard my story and know that, we've all gone through some sort of abuse, whether in relationships, family, friends, something like that. So we're going to talk about the many forms of abuse and recognizing those abusers and the victims. And then interventions. We've tried interventions with our friend recently. We've tried, I've gone through interventions with family members and friends before. And then we really want to talk about the steps that we've taken recently, especially with our friend, to guard our family and ourselves, because the negative energy that comes from this relationship that we have with him, or have with a family member or a friend that is an abuser, or maybe we're kind of an outside person in this abuse, we kind of see it, whatever. We have learned how to put up those walls and to allow certain things into our family and certain things just absolutely are not welcome. So those are the things we're going to touch on today. I think it's super important because Eddie, and maybe you can back me up, I don't think there's a single person out there that hasn't had some sort of abuse in their life. Not maybe it didn't impact them like personally, but maybe they saw it, maybe they were around it. And I mean, it's out there and everyone experiences it in some way.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
there's micro levels of abuse that everyone can go through, from the classic being bullied as a child, or even being the bullier, and then having and dealing with why are you lashing out against other people. Then you have like the work abuse that you can go through, and all the power dynamics between boss and employee, depending on if you work in a hostile or toxic environment, and of course, just relationships in general.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I couldn't. We knew that we were going to have to change the volume on my headphones, and I just couldn't hear you very well. But yeah. So I guess Phil really needs to take this from here because this has really been happening in his friend circle. That I just kind of catch the highlights, and sometimes I just grab his phone and start reading the text messages that are going back and forth.
Definitely a
And
trust exercise, and hand your spouse the phone.
wait a second, do you have anything to hide on that phone?
No, I don't, but a lot of men do.
A lot of men do. Yeah, he's like, here, start here, and yeah. So I read what's happening, and anyway, so Phil's gonna kind of take it from
Yeah,
here.
so like I was telling Eddie, like I don't want to get into too much specifics about my friend and what exactly is going on with him, just because like he's not. I have a principle where I don't like to discuss things like that when the person's
course.
not here to defend themselves. But like I know that what I've seen recently is like a pattern of utilizing a combination of, at least from my perspective, what's utilizing a combination of like shame and guilt and negative as well as positive reward to manipulate a person's behavior. And I don't entirely know, like, yeah, I can hear the dogs barking, and it's fine. It's a show.
Okay.
It happens. It happens. It happens in real life. We've had our daughter running around getting stuff in the fridge when we were we were podcasting. But like, I guess from my perspective, like when I think of abuse, and this is probably the part to throw this up here, like when I thought of abuse earlier in life, like I always thought of like, you know, it being a very physical thing, a very visceral thing, like physical abuse,
Yeah.
hitting, striking people, like that was pretty close to the forefront, and I think that's what most people think of when they hear abuse. And then we get into things like, you know, emotional abuse, which is like, you know, guilt, shame, manipulation, verbal abuse, where we see this a lot between like, you know, either between spouses or between like parents and children, where they're screaming and yelling, and that loud voice is intimidating the person.
Or just
And then-
always putting them down.
Yeah. And then we get into things like, you know, sexual abuse, which doesn't require a whole lot of explanation. But like, I even feel like in that vein, there's so many ways, because to me, once you mix three terms together, it really casts a very wide net. You've got abuse, you've got manipulation, you have neglect. All three of those things to me run together because they all tend to be different words to mean that we're utilizing something to not necessarily force, but to coerce a reaction of somebody else that is uncomfortable to that individual. So like whether we manipulate them, whether we neglect, or whether we like in an overall way abuse, all three of those things are having a negative impact on the victim. And at least from my perspective, it seems like it's usually targeted to get a result. Like, I don't know if you have that same perspective, Eddie, or not, but I'm trying to put into words like what's in my head.
Sometimes it's intended for results. Sometimes it's the power dynamic. It really depends on the type of abuse we're talking about. Sometimes, and this is the part where like even I struggle as a professional. Sometimes the abuser doesn't realize they're the abuser. Like it's just they grew up in an environment, or they don't realize what they're doing. Without getting into too much specifics, I have a client that their parent always puts them down. Like if they get like before they're all getting Fs and just smoking cannabis and weed and stuff every day. It's the same thing, but smoking stuff every day in school and getting in trouble all the time and hardly ever going to school. And then they started getting B's and 1C and going to school every day and only got in trouble once. And their parent was still like, "Well, you're still smoking, you're still getting in trouble, and how come you're getting C's instead of A's?" I mean, it's a huge improvement, and this kid, all their work was just thrown down the drain for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not like long-term abuse, but it is abuse. And the side note on abuse, like emotional abuse, is it's the one form of abuse that's almost impossible to prove.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like from my perspective, like I don't know, being nearly 40 years old and now being able to look back and recognize so much more of this than I could before is like, I feel like physical abuse is that one thing that most people would say, okay, I see that. That's physical abuse. That's not right. It's when you get off that path and you start talking about all the other forms of abuse that people really start to struggle with. Well, is that abuse, and how do we define it, and how do we recognize it, and how do we short circuit it and stop it? The waters get really, really muddy really, really fast.
I think so too. Is I think for myself, the longest time you said the word abuse, especially when it pertained to a couple, you would think man abusing the woman, and in this instance, it's not. And in all of, well, in my personal experiences, it's always been the woman who has been the abuser, and this one in particular is just.
You mean the abusee, not the abuser?
I'm saying like the woman is abusing the person,
Okay,
the
okay.
victim.
Okay.
And then that's been my experience in my life is for the most part, the woman has been the one leading the way in the abuse. And then in this instance, it's the same thing, with one of our friends who's going through something so horrible. And I think that's a cultural thing here is, obviously, especially in today's world, men are bad, men are evil, men are toxic, blah, 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 and there's so much praise for the women, and women can be just as horrible as a man can. I mean, there's no like step in abuse when it comes to just a person being abuser. It doesn't matter what gender you are.
Well, if I remember correctly, and somebody will have to correct me on the statistic, I think it was, at least with regards to spousal abuse, 30% of the time the woman was the abuser. And the primary differential there, again, by memory, is that, like, yeah, most people recognize that women can abuse men, but men report abuse at all levels of all forms dramatically less than women do, and women already don't report it super often. So it's one of those situations where, like, I couldn't tell you if that's like a cultural thing where like men are just expected to suck it up and be a man and get over it, or if it's we just know that no one's going to believe us, that our wife half our size is beating our butts at night. I don't know what the mechanism is for that, but like in this specific situation, the situations you're talking about, like, yeah, you have seen two instances of abuse that have gone on in your life where it was the woman who was the abuser. But at the same, go ahead.
So, sorry to answer. Is kind of a cultural thing. Let's take for example, you have a couple of some sort out in public. If the man takes up and like snatches the woman out of the car and starts screaming at her that how dare you act this way, blah blah. What's generally going to happen? All the people around is going to stop. Some people are probably going to get involved. Going to come over there, maybe even grab the guy. Like, hey man, what the hell's your problem? Okay, flip the situation. Yep. You have a girl basically, doing the same thing that starts smacking the guy, beating him, everything, yelling and screaming at him. Everyone's going to look at him, start laughing at the guy.
It's totally acceptable. It's totally acceptable. They're going to pull it off their phones. They're going to put it on whatever social media platform, all of them, and everyone is going to laugh at him and say he probably deserved it.
Well, and what I think is really telling is in that scenario, because I've seen it happen and I've watched the reaction on social media, is that, everybody's seen, and it's not just one, it's been multiple times it's happened on social media, but like a video's been shot where a woman has struck a man 5, 6, 7, 8 times, man hits her one time, everything in the comments from start to finish is he was in the wrong.
Yeah, you never hit a woman, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I know this is not going to be a super popular opinion, especially, like the deep South Gulf Coast culture I grew up on, but like I don't subscribe to that. And some of that is driven by the fact that I was deployed to a part of the world where women were active combatants. Women were running around with AKs and RPGs trying to blow up soldiers. So like there's a part of me that's just like, no, I'm sorry to say, but like at a certain point, I am totally on board with like treat a lady like a lady, but the minute she's trying to actively harm somebody else, the lady shield flies out the window, and it's like, no, now we have to deal with an aggressor.
That was a conversation that Phil and I had early in our relationship when we were dating.
2-3 months in.
Yeah, I had this horrible habit of like slapping him, like play, like, just slapping him and playing. And really, there wasn't any aggression behind it. It was just I was hitting him. And in my head, it was okay because I had always seen it. I had always seen it. And this was just a fun, like, whatever. And finally, I swear, one day he caught my hand, like, mid-slap. And he's like, you are not going to do this anymore because I'm not doing it to you. Like, I can't turn around and just play slap you and whatever. And he's like, this is not okay. And it kind of clicked in my head at that point. I was like, he's totally right. If he would never just play slap me, why am I play slapping him? So it was a really quick habit that was broken with myself. But yeah, I grew up seeing it. So why wouldn't it be okay to hit my boyfriend?
Well, and from my perspective, like, you and I have talked about the fact that, like, I was intentionally dating. Like, when you and I were dating, I was always looking down the road of, like, I want this woman to raise my kids, and if she's not going to be a good mother, then she's not going to be a good wife, and I don't want to be with her. So, like, I was always, even at that point, looking down the road of, there are certain behaviors I don't want to teach our children. I don't want to teach if we have a son, I don't want to teach him it's okay for a woman to friggin' put his hands on him and beat him up and slap him around. I don't want to teach him that's okay, because it's not. And if we have a little girl, I don't want her to teach her that habit either. Mm-hmm. So that's why, like, a lot of our discussions have always been manicured around, like, it's not that it bothers me necessarily, but a lot of times it's because I don't want to portray this to that child in that room. Right. I don't want her to learn that this is the way things are supposed to be, because I see our job as parents as we're trying to break some generational cycles of habits that have been taught and learned and picked up, and say we want to raise our child to be a better human being than we are. Mm-hmm. Like that. It sounds really high-minded and sentimental, but I get that way sometimes. But I feel like abuse, like whether no matter what guys we're talking about it, like I feel like abuse can be so pervasive, and like we said before, like all those ways other than physical are just super, super hard to put a finger on sometimes, which makes recognizing the abusers and recognizing the victims inherently difficult. Again, unless we're talking about a physical abuse, because like if a person shows up bruised up and beat up with their eyes swollen shut, it's pretty obvious to figure out what happened. But how do you recognize the signs of a person who is being emotionally manipulated or is being like constantly talked down to and made to feel worthless? How do you recognize the signs of a person who has been touched inappropriately? Like, how do you recognize those signs in the victim, and then how do you connect that back to this happened to you, who's your abuser? Like that, to me, that feels like an important part of the conversation, but I don't even know how to approach it sometimes.
It depends on the person's age, too. Like, each of those signs are different depending on the age of the person.
Are they gender related in your experience, or?
can be at certain things. Like let's talk about like sexual abuse and minors and stuff. It generally comes out in the form of hypersexual activity, inappropriate to the age, or depending on if it's a super young kid, like it could also just be like not the I'll just use the lay term, like like wetting their pants, like not being able to control their own bathroom abilities. When it comes, like say the kid's slightly older, again the hypersexual activity is the big one, or the inappropriate boundaries with older adults. Um, then when it comes to like mental abuse and physical abuse is pretty known. The thing that I like to do, I like to show to some of my kids who have gone through abusive relationships is that like like I bring a dog out with me sometimes, and I'll like the raise hand, like the bitch slap hand, like I'll raise out like they're super like that, and my dog doesn't flinch. And I was like, ask them, why didn't the dog flinch? Well, I don't know. Well, it's because she's never been hit. If I come up to you and I do this, your first reaction is to startle back because you have been hit. It's just to see how certain people react to violence. Some people like the fight or flight. Emotional abuse, though, it's generally a lot of it can be still acting out, which again, the problem with acting out becomes a lot of things when it comes to younger kids. So like it's hard to determine what it is, but acting out is generally an issue of what are they trying to seek? Are they trying to seek validation, even though in the form of inappropriate ways? But one of the biggest ones you see is the inability to think positively of themselves.
Mm-hmm. And what you were saying about like a child acting out, like I feel like that's also a hallmark of neglect. Because like, at least I grew up with this idea that very often when you see a child that's just habitually acting up, and they're seeking negative attention because negative attention is better than no attention.
Yeah, and it's not always. Some kids just, I'm not saying some kids are bad. Some kids just have behavioral issues. So like it's, yeah.
Well, and that's the problem is anytime we get into the realm of psychology, I mean, things become
muddied.
Yeah, because I mean, I studied psychology for a little bit in college, organizational psychology on top of that, and like, yeah, the field of psychology, it's literally kept classified as like a Bachelor of the Arts, not a Bachelor of Science, for good reason, because there is so much nuance to it. There's so few hard, fast rules, and if you look back over the last 200 years, the field of psychology has. I mean, like, there are whole schools of psychological theory that have been later just cast aside because that didn't make any sense. But at the moment, it seemed to make sense. In engineering, we refer to it as the black box theory, which the analogy works really well for human beings. So in engineering, there's an exercise almost every engineering school goes through where they hand you a black box and you can't see what's inside of it, but your job is to try to figure out what's inside of it. And you can like tilt the box from one side to the other and feel how long it takes that thing to slide before it hits the air wall, so you get an idea of the size and the weight. And sometimes there will be like strings connected back and forth to it, so you can pull on it to feel if it has a stretch or give to it, or if it's malleable. It's like all these different things, but the idea is I can't look inside of the box to figure out what this is. So I have to poke and prod at the outside of the box to try to figure it out. That's to me is the best analogy for psychology trying to figure out the human brain. We only know about this much of what's going on inside this nugget. So we got to poke and prod to try to come up with really good theories about why it works.
Unfortunately, when it comes to adults, some of the abuse, though, like they hide it well. Like it's like on the outside. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try to like crap on cops, but hey, let's have some fun here. Like a lot of police officers are really abusive towards their spouses, and from the outside perspective, it is the perfect relationship. But on the inside, it is pure hell. It's like a battleground at night.
Right. Well, and I guess that was going to be my next question. Is we talked about signs in children and adolescents. In your opinion, what do those signs look like in an adult? Because
what do we define as adult? Let's start there. We're talking about like literally over the age of 18, or do we move that bar to like 25 when a person's more established?
Yeah, I think we need to move that bar. I think, I mean, I was 18 once and I was not an adult. I'm thinking like 25 and over, maybe even 30.
So basically like the developmental adult, like when the brain is developed.
Yes, like we're done. Like
So again, it's rough because signs of abuse the same signs that work in adolescents can work in adults, but adults mask it better because you've had a lifetime of learning to mask it. A lot of it, though, the signs start showing from the people close to them. Depends on the type of the abuse, but like a lot of the control, like if they're always having to ask permission for something. This isn't always a thing, but like it's one of the things that I one of the but one of the things that I tend to think about sometimes is like if they have shared social media accounts. Like sometimes it's who cheated, sometimes it's control
Trust
issues.
issues.
Yeah, like a lot of times I always see that my first question is who cheated. but like some of that is control issues, some of it is again, like there's one thing being able to ask your spouse for do something, there's another thing to like have to ask all the time. Like I can't even go outside without their permission, or or the again, this is something you'll see sometimes, not always, because in more traditional style marriages there is the stay-at-home wife or the stay-at-home dad, depending on who makes more money. But that also then can lead to abusive situations where it's financial abuse, where like the person is stuck in that side because they have no money themselves, and they're stuck at the kids since they never get out. And so it's rough because a lot of these things that can be potential signs of abuse are also going to just be the signs of depression and stuff. It's a lot of stuff that combines together.
I feel like as we're going through this list, like the dividing line between a lot of these things really seems to be whether or not the abuser is placing their needs and wants ahead of the victims. Because like if you were a stay-at-home mom, because like we literally had this conversation before you decided you wanted to go back to work when Piper was born. Like if you were a stay-at-home mom, I would look at your needs as non-negotiable. Like I need to try to accommodate them. If you need a girls' night out, if you know, like we make financial decisions in this family not based on, well, that's your money, you figure out your life. And you know, like how many just the other day I was like, hey babe, do you need like 40-50 bucks to get you through till you get paid? There is no like, yeah, there is an element of like your money, my money, because we both work, we have separate checking accounts, we split the bills. But I've never had a problem saying, you need help, let me jump in and help. Or you need, you know, like some of my paycheck needs to flex over to help cover some of the debts you typically cover. That's not an issue. And I feel like that's the difference in a lot of these scenarios a lot of times, is that the abuser turns what should be a collaborative effort between the two into a battle of like, I'm going to get my needs and wants met at your expense. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just within the guise of like spousal relationships, I guess. Because like, you know, my parents have been in that situation since I was born. You know, mom stayed home, took care of the kids, took care of the house. Dad went out and worked. And even now that they're retired, my dad still manages the money because he's been making and managing the money for at least 40 something years, you know? But I mean, I can't imagine a time where my dad has ever said, sit in the corner and don't spend any of the retirement money. You know, he's pretty happy to take care of her any way she needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Because he views his responsibility as a husband as like, I am supposed to take care of and love and make sure my wife is provided for.
With this section that we're talking about, I know you don't want to go too specific into your friend, but why don't you talk about how you guys started recognizing your friend may have been an abusive relationship? That might be a real world example.
It's a good example.
Yeah, and bear in mind that like at the point at which this started, he lived in a different state. So like prior to all this, like he was still coming back to our hometown, which is 20 minutes away from us. But he would come back like every handful of months. Anybody that was available, he'd get together with them, hang out, catch up on things. He'd been over to our house before because there was a day when I can't remember what the deal was. I couldn't leave the house for some reason. I think I was waiting on something, and he was driving by. So he literally just pulled through, stopped by. We hung out for a minute. You know, like. Even though he lived in a different state, like he and I have known each other since I was 19 or 20 years old. So like we had a lot of history together, and he was kind of like the little brother to all of us. And then right about the point he got involved with this woman, the communication really dropped off really fast. And then he called us all up, said, "Hey, I'm coming back to Slidell. I want y'all to meet." Was it girlfriend at that point, or were they engaged?
It was girlfriend.
Okay. I want y'all to meet my girlfriend. And I'll be honest, like, I tried not to be a super judgmental person. Like, person has piercings and facial tattoos, and
She doesn't have facial tattoos.
no, but I'm making an analogy here. But yeah, she does have her face is pierced 6 ways from Sunday. But like, to me, that's your lifestyle decision. You do you. Just don't screw my friend up. Treat him right. We're cool. But there was just something in her that gave me a bit of pause.
Well, she also didn't go by her name either. She had a made-up name too, which was kind of a red flag for me. It was kind of like, instead of using her given name, she went by one name. Like, there was no last name, there was no anything. There was just one name.
I knew girls who did that. They worked in a club.
Yeah. This one didn't.
Yeah. It was very strange because there was an attachment to a dog, and the dog went everywhere. It was even in the restaurant, and this was not a working dog. It wasn't like a support animal or anything like that.
It was a purse dog.
But the mannerisms when we got to the restaurant were
Off.
very off, and I'm really good at picking up on people's energy when I first meet them, and I can tell if this is going to be like very awkward, or the energy coming off of someone is kind of strange. I feel like the entire room we were in, because it was a big group of us, it was our old crew that had met that night, it was overwhelmingly weird, just like awkward weird. And he was trying way too hard to get us to like her, like way too hard. And she would just, coy, sit back, this is me, whatever kind of thing. It was just, the dynamic between the two of them were off. And the person that we knew for so long wasn't acting like the person that we knew anymore.
Yeah. So that was an indication that the train was coming off the tracks, but at the same time, 30-something-year-old guy owns, he's living on his own, he's free to make his own decisions, but yeah, we all felt very uneasy about the interaction we had with this young lady, and just the way he was acting was off. And I think we all felt it, but none of us really knew what to do, because, what could any of us do at that point? And he went back home. He fell completely off the radar. We didn't hear from him again until he lost his job and had to relocate to a different state and go work for another business. And we heard from him a little while during that transition, and then he went radio silent again. And then the next time we hear from him, he is back in our hometown. His fiance, by this point, they've gotten engaged, is not with him. And he's just texting gibberish, like stuff that doesn't make sense, stuff that seems like not even left field. He's in the parking lot. Sentence structure very disjointed. No, we're asking him direct questions about, hey, dude, where's your girl? What's going on? What are you doing down here? What happened? Did you get fired?
Why'd you move back?
Why'd you move back? We thought you were up here 6-7 states away working. What's going on? And he wouldn't answer us. He was being very, very evasive. And as more of the story came out, I don't want to get into too much specifics, but he tried to end himself. And that was the beginning of us that was the beginning of us in this tight little friend group making contact with somebody who was able to fill in the blanks that he refused to. Mm-hmm. And that's when like I said before the show, I had to redefine what my bar for an abusive relationship was, because I have a hell of an imagination, but it wasn't good enough to cook this up. after having lived in a war zone for a year and after having been through Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, I would have thought that I could pretty much take any information, just absorb it, pack it away, and move on. But what I heard that night really, really twisted me. Like I was not prepared for everything I heard. I didn't even think some of these forms of abuse were humanly possible. So that's kind of where, like, I would say that within that string, like, the first warning sign was when the communication dropped off. And that's even hard to define sometimes, though, because, like, I have a hermit tendency where if somebody doesn't reach out to me, I could go 6 months without poking my head and be like, hey, dude, how you doing? Because it's just me. I get involved with my family and my BS, and I stop thinking about reaching out to people. But
Phil, are you neurodivergent?
We think so.
That explains it.
You see?
That's been a conversation between the two of us for probably a year now, that we haven't included anyone else in on. So yeah, Eddie, it seems like we need to like have another conversation. Yes, we think that Phil is neurodivergent and has been his whole life.
And for those curious what that means, it doesn't always mean this, but generally the most common form of neurodivergent is ADHD or autism. And again, I'm not calling him either one of those things, but those is what most people think of when they hear that term.
I have so many questions. I need to have a conversation with you, Daddy.
Well, he is your adopted son, so like you know how to get a hold of him.
I know we should have done this a lot sooner.
Great, I know I derailed this conversation. I'm sorry.
You totally did, and my brain. You've totally derailed my brain because now I'm going down that road.
We were talking about extreme forms of abuse, and then how that you recognize it. And then the question that next for this one, now that you introduced it, is, what have you guys done so far?
Okay, so one of the people in our friend group is actually family to him, and because of the difference in age, he's kind of been like the unofficial older brother to all of us. Because he's, like by the time we were all in our 20s trying to figure out our BS, like he was already working and established and married and kid, and he's just older than all of us. He was a little further down the road. He kind of, I guess I want to say, like took custody of our friend, had to move in with him temporarily, and try to manage his care, got involved with his care team, and he's the one that kind of let all the rest of us know what was going on. And he tried by himself for a couple of months to try to, I guess, talk him through the emotions and everything that had gone on, and like try to get him focused on what he needed to focus on in his opinion and in ours, to like get himself back together. Like, dude, we need to get talking about your job. We need to get talking about remote work, because like they're wanting you to come into an office that you literally can't come into because it's 6 states away. Your doctor is that you have to be here where you have a support system, not up there where you have no support system.
And her.
Yeah. So all that went on. He eventually, this older brother figure, caught the rest of us up on what was going on. We all sat down with him one evening, and like, I would say that in as gentle a way as 5 other grown men can be, we tried to sit him down and say, look, this is the situation you have been through, and these are the things we all believe you probably need to do to like get past this and become a version of yourself you're happy being. Like, that was the term I used a lot, because like I feel like if a person is trying to end their existence, it's because it's either a cry for help, or it's because they're so miserable with the human being that they don't want to be that person anymore, and they don't see another way to do it. So I kept trying to couch this in the realm of like, I want you to be a person you're happy being. I want you to have a life you're happy living. And I see these things as hurting you. And like, at one point or another, you've admitted these things hurt you. So let's leave those things in the past and move forward. And at the end of that evening, and it was like several hours of us trying to talk him through things and get him to talk to us, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of like he would start to give us some platitude or something, and we would just like shut him down and be like, no, dude, like you just gotta ask a direct question. You're trying to you're trying to talk about something different. Like we're trying to, it was very difficult to keep him engaged in the conversation because it just didn't feel like he wanted to be having that conversation. Bless you.
I should have been muted.
You were.
You were.
Okay.
We saw you.
But yeah, so like we tried a literal intervention, like approaching this from the standpoint of like like dealing with an addict, because in this context, like he wants to go back to this abusive relationship, and I view that as almost kind of analogous to addictive behavior. And the next morning he texted all of us and basically told all of us that the way we came at him was for our own benefit, not his. And he really didn't really want to hear anything any of us said. He keeps telling us he wants our help so he can have a happy, productive life. But the things we're telling him we believe he needs for that, he doesn't want those things. He wants the things he wants. And that's why I keep making this analogy to like him being an addict or him indulging in addictive behavior, because like that's the nearest analog I can see when we're talking about somebody going back to an abusive relationship. It's like addictive behavior. It's like, I know the cocaine's going to kill me eventually, but I really like getting high. And at least like for me, that's how I try to envision like
It's more the dopamine's in the brain telling you you need it, not you want to get high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. But like I guess that's how I view like when you have like a physically abused spouse and she takes the dirt bag back, or he takes the crazy lunatic back like 15 or 20 times, it's like they're gonna kick your butt again. Like we all know that.
So how we deal with interventions like that on our end is that we almost, if very rarely you're going to come across someone who's ready to like jump ship now. Let's talk about one of the ones you're the more likely to run across. Your female friend or your female friend that's a mom with kids and stuff that need to get out. Not always they're willing to get out. Like if they're a mom, one of the ways that you can start this is conversations about like, do you want your kids around this? But let's actually talk about the interventions that you can do before they're ready to jump ship. Some of it is start having them come up with plans like, okay, when you are ready, how do you get out? Like these are the list of the women's shelters in the area. They're hard to find, by the way. They're intentional. You generally have to go to like the social work office to get them, and then they're going to know why you want them because they're hidden for a reason. And then start thinking of ways that they can squirrel away money without their abuser knowing. Can you take $1 here and there without them knowing? And then where can you store this where they won't ever find this? Start basically thinking of the rainy day plan. Again, this is for like those extreme forms of like physical abuse, like, you got to get out. And then as far as like them going back, yeah, you're going to deal with someone who's dealing with like an addictive behavior because they have been taught through years of this manipulative behavior, either in the form of physical or mental, most of the time both, that this person is the only one good for them. And the other people, your friends trying to tell you different, just don't know what's best for you.
Yeah, I don't think we're even at that stage of looking for the help centers and things like that. And I mean, he's not going to need that kind of stuff because he's in a place, like he just bought a house. Like there's just still a lot of weird behavior going on with him. And it's almost like sporadic and not there. No thought is given to it. It's just like, I want to do this and it's done. Like I'm going to go
super impulsive.
Thank you. Impulsive. Like I'm going to buy a jet ski today. And
is he on substances?
He's on antidepressants.
He's on prescription.
Okay, is he on anything illegal?
No, not that we know of.
Okay. Generally, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, having known this guy 20 years, like, I don't know, impulsivity in limited amounts, I would expect of him. Because, like I said, he's always kind of had the little brother relationship to all of us. Even though we were a couple years older, it was just his personality. He was always a little bit impulsive. But the level of impulsivity I'm seeing out of him is far enough out of bounds that it stands out, if that makes sense. Like, this is a guy, you would hand a lit Roman candle and he'd go running down the street as a 20-year-old just having a party. No thought given to how could this end badly or anything. Like, we used to joke that there's a part of the brain that causes self-preservation instinct, and he was born without it. Mostly.
I mean, when I was 20, I was doing the same thing. We were aiming at each other with Roman candles.
Yeah, but I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, he was always as impulsive as any other boy his age would be, or man his age would be, and possibly a bit more. But this level of impulsivity stands out because it's further out of bounds compared to what he used to be. And I would expect by his mid-30s, the impulsivity would have like tapered down a little bit.
To get specific with his situation, I'd actually have to know specifics, and I know we don't want to get into that. So generalities when it comes to like abuse, it depends on the type of abuse that you're seeing and like the stuff you're recognizing in your friends and family group. That's why I always try to, like, a lot of times when I'm working with like female clients and stuff, it's working like the prepared list of, okay, what next, what to do in the event when you get to the stage, and or what is your breaking point. Like, a lot of times I ask people, what is your breaking point? Okay, you can take him hitting you, you can take him forcing sex, or you can take her hitting you, take her forcing sex, whatever. What is your breaking point? What is, if this happens, I'm done. Like, have them think of a actual, and even maybe extreme, it could be extreme because, like, say someone's had their, like, a bone's broken. Well, they have a pretty good breaking point, but like, you have them recognize what is their breaking point. Is it if they lay a hand on my kid? Like, what is it? Like that, like, have them identify whatever that is. If it's an adult, for that is the time for I need help.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it has been asked. And this is not a dig at Phil or any of the guys, but the wives of this group, we've kind of been asked not to be there. And one of the reasons is because it could be a trigger for him because he's not married, he doesn't have the family, and somebody had made the comment that that it would have been bad for him to see happy relationships. And so we've kind of been, like I said, just reading text messages as they come in off of our husbands' phones.
But also in that vein, it's like I pointed out to you and to somebody, another one of the spouses and one of this group of men who've been trying to help is like, or actually I didn't get to point out to her, I wish I'd gotten that opportunity, but like, this is also, I also draw this as, if you have a woman who's been abused by men, she would understandably probably be more sensitive to being in the presence of other men in a counseling session. She would probably be more guarded. She'd probably be less comfortable. And knowing that this abuser in this relationship was female, I could totally understand where having a group of other men around him might have been a better initial play to try to, like, you know, get through to him rather than having mixed gender company. I could understand that when that was proposed to me. I don't know if it really made a difference at the end of the day, but I think to your point, Eddie, like, I don't think he's ready. And that takes us to the next point, which is the really hard one, because I'm now in a position, and, you know, Gillian has been in this position too, and probably a lot of people who've had an adjacent relationship to theirs that involves some level of abuse. Like, we're now in the position of, how do we guard ourselves and our families? Because I know that when I came home from that intervention, I was so emotionally drained. Like, it was 3 hours of trying to talk to get through to him, and it just, like, slapping my face against a brick wall over and over and over. And then there's, like, it took me, what, babe, 2-3 days of talking?
At least 2 or 3 days.
Of just talking through all the things I had found out had happened to him before I could even process what an incredible hell he has lived through for the last 3.5 years. Like, it was emotionally and mentally draining to hear and to absorb all that.
Welcome to my career.
Yeah, I have all the respect in the world. Now, I've told you this, Eddie. Like, I have all the respect in the world for people that work in the mental health field and in the medical health field, because, like, y'all, I don't think y'all very often get to meet somebody who is not in a really bad situation, and I cherish what y'all do for people. I don't know how you do it, because if I had to, if the other night was my everyday going to work, I would make it like a month, and I would be sucking my thumb in the corner, because I can't. I can compartmentalize things pretty well. I mean, it kind of comes with the territory of being a combat vet, but like there is there is a certain level of compartmentalizing that I just don't think I can do. Stuart's with us, by the way.
Hi, Grandpa.
Yeah, this is Stuart's thing. Is every time he joins the show late, he says, "Okay, I'm here. Y'all can start now."
Well, and to kind of go back to what Phil was saying, the type of abuse, and I like I said, I can pick up on people's energies pretty well. This was, I've never heard of people doing the things that she did, the type of abuse that she was giving, like having anyway, the verbs are not coming out, the words aren't coming out. The feeling that I got, Eddie, was just like this black tar, drippy, like evil. And it felt like when Phil came home that night that our friend had been just consumed by her evil black tar drippiness. And it had somehow come home with him. Like I could just feel the depression and the grossness of the situation had come back to our house. And so I didn't immediately, because like I had to process what I was feeling when he came home and what I was being told, what was happening to our friend and all that stuff. And the next day I called our other friends, our other people that are involved with all of this, and I said, this can't, I love our friend. I've always loved him. He's always been a dear friend to ours. I cannot allow this in my house. This cannot happen. This is something that I didn't want to know at 39 years old. I'm sure as hell not going to allow any part of this into my 11-year-old's mind or thoughts or anything like that, because this is just not something that we need to discuss in this house with her. And having any bit of it made me very, very uncomfortable. And so as much as it hurts me, and I've done this, I've had to do this with other family members and friends that I felt were very negative, and the abuse, there had to be an end to it. I had to stop it. The wall had to be put up. The guilt is there for me. Like I don't like doing it. I want to help him. I want to be there for him. I want my husband to be able to be there for him. But I firmly put that wall up and said, absolutely not. This cannot come into my house. And so what do you do at that point? It's just kind of like let him fend for himself. Once he's not at the point, like when you ask him what is your end goal, what do you want, he wants to go back to her. There is no other thought of getting away, of moving away. He wants to move her here, and 20 minutes away is too far. I mean, it's too close to me.
And he has there is not a single physical or financial barrier to him breaking contact. It is totally, he doesn't want to.
He doesn't. He's not there, and I just can't allow it.
And I was going to say, hey, also, like, you've also been in the position of having to hold certain people at arm's length, not because they were, yes, because there was abuse towards you, but also because they've been abusive to other people in our presence, and we just refuse to allow Piper to be party to that or see that.
Yeah.
This really does, to me, it really comes down to like just kind of a philosophy I've had about the friend circle I keep since I've become a father and a husband is, if people are not a positive influence in my family's life, I can't have them around. And that's, sometimes that means people get pretty upset with me, like, why can't we hang out? We used to be boys, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, because you're not a positive influence in my 11-year-old daughter's life. Like, you want to go out and get stewed and screwed and drink till your eyeballs fall out. And I don't want I don't act like that around my daughter. I don't get drunk to oblivion in front of my daughter. I don't lose control of myself. And I don't want other people that behave that way around her either. It really comes down to an idea of like, there before I had a child and before I got married, I had a pretty wide berth of what I was prepared to tolerate from the people around me. And that has really constricted heavily because I now look at everything in the guise of, if this is not a person I'm comfortable being around, my wife and kid, I'm not comfortable being around them anymore. And that is the hard part, because when you do find that there's somebody that used to be in your life or still is, and you have to, I hate to say like you have to pick, but when you're talking about like, I know one of our close friends, he literally he told us, not the friend who we were intervening in, but the rest of the intervention team. He said, guys, like the next day he texted and said, guys, I can't do this. Like, this is, and I know that he himself has lived through some abuse before, and he's not in that place now. But even he said, this has affected me and I can't do this. Like, this is bad for me. And he's got a wife and kids himself. So like, I told him, I'm like, dude, you have to, like, your responsibility to be dad and be husband supersedes your responsibility to be his friend. If this is hurting you, you have to pull out. It's the only responsible thing to do. But that's a bitter pill to swallow.
You don't really, I don't really know what else I could add to this, because you guys kind of already covered it. Like, I view this as the same thing. Like, there's professionals out there to help. If someone's not willing to get to the point where they're at the point where they're help, then unfortunately some people, they're not, it's not that they're beyond help, just some people just aren't ready for it. You provide the resources and maybe they'll take it. Not everyone has to reach rock bottom, but I look at this as the same way. Like, if you have the family, and like if you all go to the family, like you all have that one creepy uncle that like, you don't let the little girls be around, why are you inviting that creepy uncle around?
Right.
So like, same thing. Like, if you have someone that's negatively affecting your family, sometimes you have to guard the home front. Like, and now it's easier for some people like me and Phil, who don't have a problem going full nuclear and go, I don't care, you're dead to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you say that, but like, I'm not gonna lie, like 20 years of friendship is, it's still, it's one of those things where it does hurt a little bit to have to do this.
Of course.
Especially because, like, he's almost been like a younger brother to me for years. And I want to see him succeed in life. I want to see him get better. I want to see the best for him. And
So
it hurts because I can't help him. I don't think anybody can right now.
in situations like that, you just provide the resources, and then you have to protect your home front.
And that's kind of where we're all at right now, is like, we believe we have identified the problem. We've told him what we believe the problem is. He argued with all of us about the fact that like he felt like we were trying to force him into this. We were making the decision for him, and I told him, I'm like, look, there's 5 men around you right now that all have homes, cars, wives, most of us have kids, we all have our crap together, like we are all productive, stable members of society. What are the odds that all 5 of us see the situation exactly the same way, and you're the one that sees it correctly, completely opposite of the rest of us? Is it possible? Sure, but what are the odds that everybody in your friend circle you've known for 20 years who have never steered you wrong before, we're screwing with you now?
I will say this. You tried the direct combative route. It might be time to change tactics if you guys choose to stay with helping him.
What would that tactic be?
Sometimes like this one would be more along the lines of just, hey, you guys mentioned like maybe sex addict. Fine if there's a sex anonymous thing in the area. It's like, hey, this is a group I heard about. It's not they talk about stuff similar to what you talked about. Maybe there's someone there that understands you more than I do, because you've gone through stuff. There's people here that maybe understand you better. And if he doesn't believe he's that, then hey, this is just a thought.
Yeah, well, I know for a fact that like in this specific instance, he is speaking to a mental health professional, but I have little to no confidence that he is being honest with that professional. Like what I feel like.
Do you know who that professional is? Because while they can't seek you out, we are allowed to take any type of information you give us without asking permission for it.
Oh, really now?
Wait, I'm sorry. I kind of zoned out. What did you say?
He's saying
So
that.
while I
Go
can't
ahead.
go ask you for to give me the specifics because I have to get a release of him, of the patient, to give permission for me to talk to you. If you choose to talk to me, I'll shut up and let you talk.
Interesting. Eddie, I hope you have your whole afternoon cleared because we've got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
Piper's at a friend's house. I'm gonna go get some more coffee.
Well, we have to go pick Piper up, and I know he has something to do this
No,
afternoon.
I'm joking. I'm joking. But anyway, so that's
Mom will be texting you.
Yeah,
right
I'm
after
sure.
the show. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's I feel like that's kind of that's the hard part about when you're dealing with abuse or when you're dealing with an abused person. Like most people's natural inclination is like they desperately want to help. They desperately want this person to be the best version of themselves. And like that's another phrase I use a lot is because it's like it's not like I want this. It's not like I want this for you for my benefit. Like my life continues without him. My family's taken care of. My career is my career, but it pays the bills. Like I'm handling my business with or without him. I want him to be the best version of him for himself, so that he can enjoy the same success and happiness I have. And it's heartbreaking to know that like there you can't, you literally can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. And I feel like that's the hardest thing about once you overcome everything else. You've identified the abuse, you've identified the victim and the abuser, the intervention failed. I feel like that's the hardest part that's left. Is if the intervention doesn't work, I hate to say you got to let them go, but like you can't stand at ground zero when the hand grenade pops just because they're holding on to the grenade.
Yeah.
Like I can't. I told the other guys, I'm not falling on my sword for him. I have responsibilities here in this house that supersede my responsibilities to anything and anybody else, and that's hard. But I feel like at a certain point, if you have an abuser in your life, that is going to be what it ends up coming down to, is that for your own self-preservation, for the self-preservation of your family, you're going to have to make a really hard decision to limit your contact to that abuser, or if you are the victim, to get away from them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
See-
think that's a great place to end.
Episodes like this are so hard though, because it's such a sensitive subject. It's uncomfortable to talk about, but I feel like it needs to be talked about because
It's uncomfortable because it's not a societal norm, and we as society needs to start exposing things. Just like when you were calling it end himself instead of suicide, we as society don't say words that are make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And
I also do
yes.
that because YouTube has a bad habit of punting things off their platform if you use
Oh.
certain words.
Okay, sorry.
Well, that's
You have to
okay. I
use the
do it
code
all the
words.
time. I do it all the time, Eddie, and I'm just like, dang it, I got us banned again. I said something that was going to trigger somebody, and I got us banned.
I watch a lot of World War II videos, and they always refer to a certain German as the evil mustache man. So I get it.
Stop.
That's why you were texting Evil Mustache Man. That's hilarious.
Well, Eddie, I certainly appreciate you coming on the show today and giving us your insight into what we're dealing with. But then also, if anyone, listening to the podcast is in the same situation, which odds are there's somebody out there that is either going through something similar that we're going through or has been or whatever, some form of abuse. So
Can I do a plug for my show?
By all means.
absolutely, yes.
So
please.
if you're interested in learning more about actually what we do in therapy and how maybe it's like we're not the bad guys and we're not actually trying to take your guns and stuff away, if you go over to Walk the Talk America and look at our podcast, we have a group of 4 clinicians that weekly we cover topics about various forms of therapy and also like how like real world examples of how we would deal with things. So feel free to check it out. Phil, I'll give you the link so you can throw it in the notes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We'll definitely tag you and
And
tag
do you also
the
want to
show.
plug your YouTube channel or no?
It's not really a thing yet. If you want to look me up, I'm Black Powder Therapist on all the socials.
Yeah, and I'll also try to remember to toss a link in the show notes too when I interviewed you about your world premiere into Hollywood and being famous on Matter of Facts podcast.
We're so proud of you, son.
We're so proud of you, son.
For the record, now that if you actually have Hulu, you can watch my show for free. It's it's Mountain Man Ultimate Marksman. It's the first 4 episodes are on Hulu now.
Sweet. Awesome.
We don't have Hulu though.
Well, somebody does.
Oh,
Somewhere.
Don't say that.
It
Don't
was
say
another,
that.
It was
Don't say
another
that.
plug.
Don't say that.
All right,
There's leftover
guys.
cruise missiles coming for you.
Oh, I know, right? Don't
Oh,
share the
no.
passwords. Well, we certainly appreciate it, Eddie, and always love having you on. And I'm glad that you made your first time on Raising Values. I know you've been on Matter of Facts before, but definitely.
but it sounds like you might be having to come back on.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot to discuss. A lot to discuss.
Well, you know
anyway,
my right.
We're gonna have to talk about your rate.
$1.25 an hour, right?
$1.25 an hour. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today, and yeah, audio drops on Tuesday. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, we certainly appreciate it. So, anyway, that's all. That's all, folks.
Take care.
Bye,
All
everybody.
right, bye everybody.